Let me tell you a short story about how my team and I went through the eye of the needle one night when the weather was bad. I'm the captain of a wide-body airplane. We just about made it by thanks to the place where I used to work, giving us great training. It happened in Nairobi, Kenya, where we used to fly goods out of. I think it was October. That was during the short range. First there is the long range, and then it rains all day. Then there is the short range in the fall, and what it is just that. It started to rain out of the blue and it poured like crazy. It's amazing, and then it's gone. So, my co-pilot and I took off in this MD-11, and there was a ground engineer traveling back to Amsterdam with us. He was sitting behind us. We took off for the runway behind a British company's 747, and it was raining and dark, and the lighting at this African airport isn't great. Anyway, as we taxied to the runway, we saw the 747 take off and rise into the night sky, disappearing into the clouds. After a few minutes, we were given the all clear to take off. We heard the 747 pilot say goodbye to the station and switch over to the departure on the radio. We began our takeoff roll after talking to air traffic control. I turned the radar, 5 degrees nose up, which means it looks at the sky above you to see if there is weather. There was just a little bit of clutter of green returns, which means there is only light rain. That's why we were going faster. There aren't as many strong lights on the left and right edges of this runway as there are at other big airports. We were going faster when out of the blue the sky fell on us. I think it was around 90 or 100 knots. My eyes were so blurry from the rain that I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Even with the screen wipers on full, I still couldn't see what was in front of me. Like at some other airports, there were no lights on the center line. It was pretty much a cross-eyed search to see if we were the same distance from the lights on the left and right sides of the runway. Several things were going through my mind. Could I stop the takeoff for this reason? There are rules about when you can stop a takeoff, and this wasn't one of them. And I was so focused on steering the plane that I didn't think about what this heavy rain might mean. The plane sped up, and just as we were about to take off, the co-pilot gave the order, V rotate. You pulled the yoke toward you, and the nose lifted off. At that very moment, we saw a warning red flashing light on our flight displays that said, tailwinds here, tailwinds here, tailwinds here, and it felt like someone had a cold hand on you. We raised the nose, and I did the standard reflex of raising the gear at the same time, which is against protocol in that situation, but we did it anyway. We took off at full speed and began to fly. I kept an eye on the altimeter while we were off the ground and the gear was cycling up. The altimeter showed a field elevation of about 5,380 feet, and I could see on the navigation display that the wind vane had changed from 3 knots on the nose to more than 20 knots on the tail. You don't want to be that person because it makes you fall backwards. At that time, when I had all that information, I focused on the flight directors. The magenta lines on your flight display that show you the best way to get through that wind shear and out of it are lifesavers. I flew that plane with my fingertip and spit. I had it nailed to that pitch bar, which guided me almost with the nose as high as a stall to make sure we didn't go back down and hit the ground. As a young captain, that was a litmus test for me. I was cool as a cat. I went straight into the mode we practiced so much in the simulator, the training mode. I was just sitting there, glued to those magenta bars on the flight display. It was like I was looking through a straw. Time seemed to stop. It seemed like it was going by very slowly. It felt like this thing, tailwind, shear, tail, wind shear, and the nose was up so high, maybe 20 to 23 degrees, and the airplane was clawing at the air. And it was not climbing. It was just floating through the air at field elevation. Basically, the gear was up and it did not climb at all, and I just kept watching those 2 magenta bars, and then, finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the wind turned around and we turned us again on the nose, and the airplane slowly started to climb. We climbed out to 10,000 feet, which is about 5,000 feet above field elevation, made our standard left turn towards the north, towards a beacon called Nakuru, and we cleaned up the airplane, which means we withdrew. We retracted the flaps and the slats, and we did the after takeoff checklist, and then the stressors came in. The something happened on the happening in your brain on the blood-brain barrier, where if you want to survive, you go into the survival mode, and those panic impulses are basically refused by your body. That goes into almost something like an A-core state to survive to get out. which was for me a test because I didn't know how I would react. But we did our after takeoff checklist, and then it's like your brain is released again from that survival. Stayed at nose, okay, pulled it through my heart, started beating like wouldn't believe it was just pounding out of my chest. And I looked at my co-pilot in the darkness, and he was dead quiet and pale, and we knew we went through the eye of the needle. There it was absolutely nothing short of amazing. And it was all thanks to that amazing training that we received in the airline that I was working at that time. And I asked my co-pilot, and he said, "You know what I noticed?" He said, "We have an altimeter that sits between the main gears and bounces back radio signals off of the ground." And he said we were on that altimeter 15 feet off the ground. Now remember, this is halfway down the fuselage of an airplane, halfway down the length. Of that 55-meter-long body, the nose is way up 22 degrees and the tail is way down. So if you figure that we flew on that radio altimeter altitude of about 15 feet, the tail during that emergency must not have been more than 1 or 2 meters off. The ground, we were flying in darkness beyond the runway across the prairie outside Nairobi Airport, with our tail only maybe 3 to 6 feet off the ground. It was when you think of that just, yeah, we went through the eye of the needle at night, and training saved the day. It's amazing, isn't it?